Give him Liam. I wasn't actually going to do this bonus episode. I get it's not really the first episode; it's a bonus episode. So I'll be here on my own today. You're stuck with me, unfortunately, and my monotonous voice. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of what to expect. So I'm doing this show because I think there's a common thread between successful people, entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, and you can even apply it to your family and any endeavor that you take. Where I think there's an element of I think there's a common thread between all these successful people in the world, and I'm looking through the lens of this podcast to try and discover what that is. I have some ideas, I have some preconceived ideas, but I think doing this podcast, I really wanted to kind of throw those out the window and really test, test people, ask lots of questions. So, yeah. But I guess at heart, this is still a rugby podcast. Everyone knows I love rugby. I've dedicated a significant portion to my life to playing and now coaching as an older, retired, broken man. So I think, I want to explore that. There'll be a lot of rugby chat, unfortunately. So if you don't like rugby chat, maybe think about a different podcast. But there's going to be some really interesting guests. I've got a few guest hosts, one of which will feature next week. And they'll feature sort of 3 or 4 times throughout the year. I've got a rotating guest list. Everyone from rappers, artists, music producers, business people, and athletes. So it's going to be interesting. Most of it's conversational, free flowing. It's just me asking questions and hoping to find that common thread that I'm looking for. So yeah, I think could be interesting, could be a flop. I guess we'll see. First thing we got to do before we get into this episode is thank the cover, cover.com.au, Cover Podcast Network. Heaps of good stuff happening through there. Daily Dribble Podcast, NBL, NBA, Dual Threat Podcast is about to come across. They're established, been doing a lot of good stuff for a lot of years now, so they're about to come on board and hopefully the cover will help them take it to the next level. You got me, Liam, Give Him Liam podcast, just going to be interesting. Columns galore. Tobias Canning's always doing good stuff with his NRL column. This will probably replace my rugby column, but it is going to free me up to do some other stuff, some more pop culture type things and some other things. So that's going to be exciting. But yeah, keep your eyes out. Keep your eyes peeled. Make sure you're checking out that website regularly. Make sure you're following us, The Cover AU, at The Cover AU on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. We're there. We're on there. We're active, posting all kinds of stuff, sharing all kinds of stuff. And if you've got a story for us, like anything, something you're interested in, something you think needs to be reported and hasn't, just DM us. Send us an email, whatever. Because that's the kind of stuff, we like to cover. Things that aren't necessarily being covered by other outlets. That's kind of our thing. Well, that's what we want to make our thing. So, all right, let's get started here. As I said, I wasn't going to do this podcast this way. I wasn't going to do this bonus episode. So this one, but I haven't really seen anything about, previewing Super Rugby Pacific. So I'm not going to do every team. I'm not going to do the Kiwi teams. I'm not going to do the 2 teams in the Pacific, the minor Pacifica and the Fiji Drua. I'm not going to do them, and I'm not going to do those teams because I'm not here trying to say that I know everything about those teams. I know a lot about the Australian Super Rugby franchises, so I want to preview them. Have a look at their key ins and outs. Have a look at, potential starting 15s. Maybe have a discussion. Maybe tell you about where I think, the type of footy I think they're going to play, where I think they can improve, and perhaps where they're going to finish on the table. And then I'm also going to have a look at a Wallabies team. Now, that's a nice segue. That's a nice segue that I did there. So the Wallabies team that I've picked sort of takes into account Giteau Law. So, there's I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think it's 7 years of Super Rugby, consecutive years of Super Rugby service, or 60 test matches, or both, whatever. And you become eligible to play overseas, don't have to play in the Super Rugby competition, and you can still be eligible for the Wallabies. So I read today that Rugby Australia is looking at just scrapping that altogether. So basically saying you can play overseas, if you play good, we'll pick you for the Wallabies. So I've written about this in the past, and it's something that I don't agree with. I think it's silly. There's a ton of reasons I think it's silly, but I guess the biggest one, or biggest, let's say there's four reasons I think it's silly. The first one sort of is around player development, right? So at the moment, we get these guys in from their schools teams. Guys often will come out of club rugby into these academies and develop for a couple of years in there, jump up, maybe they get an EPS contract, extended player contract, jump onto a standard contract, and that's kind of the way that it works, and if they're lucky, or if they're good enough, they get an opportunity with the junior Wallabies, which we haven't seen a lot of the last couple of years for obvious reasons, but that's kind of the natural progression. We go and then eventually up into Super Rugby, up into the senior national team, and away we go. And then we usually see those players at some point go, well, I'm kind of good. I've played in a couple of World Cups. I'm ready to now make some bank playing for Toulon or Saracens or wherever. So if we get rid of Giteau Law, we're basically saying that Super Rugby is a development competition, and we lose a lot of control over the way our players develop. Now, I know we haven't got this right in the past in Australia. We really, every state body is doing something different. Players are developing differently. There's no uniform approach to, athletic development and skill development. So we don't have a perfect system. And I got really excited a few months ago when I heard them talk about going to a centralised academy system. And for those of you who don't know, this is something that David Nucifora proposed a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, maybe longer, and ultimately lost his job for. So David Nucifora, ironically, is now the head of high performance with Ireland Rugby, and he's implemented it, or him and Irish Rugby have implemented a centralised system, and they're starting to see the reap the rewards of that now. They're currently sitting fourth in the world. They've beaten the All Blacks 3 of the last 4 times, or 2 of the last 3 times that they've played. So, and there are examples all around the world of centralised academies working. The AIS here in Australia is probably a really good example. When all the sports were centralised, there was a lot of success. When they were pushed back out, there was still some success, but probably not on the same scale. The Russians, the USSR, like I appreciate all the doping stuff, but centralised sports, centralised academies, they seem to work. And I guess in rugby, the best example is the New Zealanders. They have a uniform approach to athlete development and skill development, and an emphasis on skill development. So that doesn't mean that every Super Rugby franchise is running the same shape or doing the same line-out moves or backline moves or starter plays or whatever. What it means is every player is benchmarked to the same standard and is working off the same programs, is working off the same skill development methodology, so that when they do make the jump, from club footy to the ITM Cup to Super Footy to the All Blacks, their skills and their athletic development or their athletic background or base is at the level that is required to play there. At the moment in Australia, we don't have that. So anyway, I got off track. So I got excited when they started talking about a centralised system here in Australia for that reason. Now they're talking about repealing Giteau Law completely. So I see that as a problem because what I think will happen is players will come through our system, and if it's a centralised system, great, but they'll come through our system, play, a couple of years of super footy and then take off. So if I'm someone like Noah Lolesio, right, and I've played a couple of test matches already, a handful, and I've already won a Super Rugby title, Super Rugby AU in 2020. What's keeping me here in Australia earning less money than if I went and played for Toulon or Stade de France or Saracens or Leicester or whoever? What is the carrot here in Australia? Because I can earn more money over there, right? Now, you might not see that as a bad thing, but it is a bad thing because he's a young player. Hopefully Dave Rennie has a plan for him. Hopefully Rugby Australia has a plan for him. But if he then takes off and goes to, let's say he plays in France. Plays for Stade de France. Do you think if Dave Rennie calls up their director of rugby and says, hey, I want you to do X, Y, Z with Noah, do you really think they're going to do that if that doesn't suit them? Of course they're not going to do it. And they're not going to do it because their job is to win a premiership at that level. They don't care. They don't care about the national team. They don't care about the Wallabies. I don't even think they really care about their own national team, given the clubs wouldn't release 2/3 of the French squad to tour Australia last year. So they don't care about the way this player develops and the way he might fit into the Wallabies team. They only care about winning games. So they're going to train him however they want. So I guess that's, maybe that's an extreme example, but we basically lose control of the way our players are being developed. And if we are going to invest in a centralised system, then it's kind of oxymoronic to go, okay, well, we're going to develop all of these players who are then going to go play overseas. Does that make sense? Maybe not. The next issue I have are the test windows. So Reg 9 requires clubs to release their international players or players to their international team between November and February, Six Nations, all of that, and then in the July test window. So this doesn't really suit the Wallabies because the majority of our tests, so yeah, we play in July. We have a touring team, June, July, whatever. We play them. That's cool. 3 tests. Awesome. We'll probably win those. But then the competition that matters, the Four Nations, Rugby Championship, Tri-Nations, whatever iteration it ends up being the next time, Bledisloe Cup, all of that, our players aren't going to be available. And we've already seen on a small level the Japanese clubs not release Quade Cooper, not release Samu Karevi, who, to be fair, were our 2 best players. They were, hands down. Samu Karevi, I think, cemented himself as one of the best inside centres in the world over that time. But they wouldn't release them because Reg 9 doesn't require them to. So I think that is a huge challenge because Rugby Australia is going to have to lobby World Rugby to extend those windows, which probably has some huge commercial implications for the European competitions. The cost is another factor. Now, players being released for international duty, there's a cost associated with this because you have to insure their contracts. So if they do get injured playing for the Wallabies, then you effectively have to take out an insurance policy so that the club that they're playing for, Toulon, Stade de France, don't have to foot that bill. So you effectively have to guarantee those contracts with the clubs. The other thing that's going to be costly is all of the moving pieces. So let's say we have 13 to 20 of a squad located overseas. That's flights, business class flights, mind you. Flights, accommodation, meals, potentially families as well. That's all going to have to be absorbed by Rugby Australia, which is something we don't need to do right now. Only for tours do we need to do that. And, when we bring them in for camps and whatever. But so there's a significant amount of cost. And then, the other factor with the cost is, do the Wallabies start having their camps in Dubai, or do they start having their camps in Europe because all their players are based in Europe? And what does that look like in terms of a cost? Do we have to hire a stadium? We have to hire a high performance facility. And so all that money they've just spent on Moore Park, redeveloping that, is a waste. The final thing is rugby in Australia becomes a really unattractive commercial product for anyone, but particularly for broadcasters, because we are saying, as I said earlier, that, all of our best young players, all of our best players, we're just going to let them go and play overseas because the only carrot keeping them here playing for the Wallabies, it doesn't matter. I can play for the Wallabies anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter. Who cares? So all of our best players, in my view, are going to go and play in Japan. They're going to go and play in Europe because they can earn more money. So Super Rugby then, in Australia at least, becomes a development competition, which I guess is fine, but who pays for that? So the broadcaster isn't going to pay for it because all of the best players are overseas. So they're going to start looking at, well, let's broadcast Japanese games, let's broadcast the European games because all of Australia's best players are over there. Or maybe they don't look at it at all and they go and spend their money elsewhere. We sully the relationship between Australia and New Zealand because those games aren't going to be competitive anymore because all of the best All Blacks are still playing in New Zealand. So tell me if all of Australia's best players are overseas, if Super Rugby, Australian Super Rugby teams are effectively a group of guys who are either up and coming or are, maybe having a step up from club footy or coming back to Australia, after they've made their money in their late 30s. It's not an attractive product for broadcasters. It's not an attractive product for sponsors. So who is going to pay for professional rugby in Australia? Or do we just not have it? So that's my rant. Now, you're going to get Conspiracy Liam here, who's an interesting guy. He has some views. So, with my conspiracy theory hat on, and the timing of this Giteau Law announcement or report that's being reported, does scrapping Giteau Law foreshadow that this private equity deal that Rugby Australia has been working on, is it telling us that deal is maybe dead or maybe not as lucrative as we thought? So RA in the short term is trying to lower costs by allowing the top players to go so they don't have any of those top-heavy contracts with their Super Rugby franchises. They'll still have to top them up at the top end. But those grants or that grant money that they're giving the Super Rugby teams will be better spent because they won't have any of those top-heavy, a couple $100,000 contracts. All the contracts will be, somewhere between, say, 50,000 and 150,000. And they are effectively, using Super Rugby as a development competition or a farm system like minor league baseball, like the D League or G League as it's called now, or the VFL, for example, except where we're sending our players overseas to then come back to play for the Wallabies. I don't know. That's my theory. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's not. Oh, you're getting two You're actually getting 2 conspiracy Liams here for the price of 1. So the other thing I want to talk about, and my producer is shaking her head. She's telling me don't do it, but it's just a quick one. So everyone who knows me knows that sevens is an area that I like. That's the area I'm coaching in at the moment and have been doing for the last 5 years. Mostly in the women's game, but I've certainly dabbled in the men's game as well. I have a theory that John Manenti and Walshy, Tim Walsh, who at the time, John was the women's sevens coach, Tim was the men's sevens coach. In the lead up to the Olympics, there was a report that had said those two had signed new contracts to go into the next Olympic cycle. Both teams, I think the men's team probably performed about where we thought. The women's team certainly underperformed. And look, I don't have any inside information about why that happened. I think they caught a red hot Fiji team on the wrong day and didn't play their best game, which ultimately knocked them out and meant they had to go and play for 5th place. But there was a report that both of those coaches had their contracts renewed through to the next Olympic cycle. Then they underperformed. Then Rugby Australia said, "Oh, we're taking applications for these 2 roles." Cool, awesome. I guess that makes sense. After you underperform, you do a review, whatever. Then they made the decision to just swap the 2 coaches. So Conspiracy Liam thinks that they had already had those 2 guys under contract, felt they needed to save face, and went through a process to determine to try and find new coaches. Didn't find any, so they just swapped the 2 over. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's my theory. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But you can't tell me that there weren't some good coaches out there. I know Ben Ryan doesn't have a job at the moment. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into the nuts and bolts here. So, what I want to do now is have a look at all the Super Rugby teams in Australia, Australian-based Super Rugby teams, and just do a little bit of a preview of each team. So, for those of you watching this on YouTube, you should see the Waratahs logo here for the first team. For everyone listening, the first team I'm going to talk about is the Waratahs. So let's first just have a look at the key ins and key outs, or transfers, whatever you want to call them. So the outs are Robbie Abel, Chris Talakai, Jack Wetton, Sam Kidd, Sam Wicks, Jack Dempsey, Tepai Maroa, Jack Maddox, Joe Cotton, Chris Totola. So, I mean, Jack Dempsey is a decent out. I've always been surprised that he didn't sort of come on more. But I think the big disappointment there is probably Jack Maddox. So after I saw him play initially for the Rebels, I'm thinking, oh man, this dude's he's the next big fullback prospect in Australia. He's going to come on in leaps and bounds. He's quick, really good skills, good kicking game. At the time he looked like he was pretty intelligent footballer, read the game well, particularly for a young man. And I don't know what happened down at the Rebels, but ultimately went to the Tars, tried his hand at sevens, and he's kind of now gone out the back door. So but for me, that's a disappointing. I feel like he's got a lot of potential, and maybe he goes overseas and unlocks some of that, making me look silly on my rant about Giteau Law. But yeah, I feel like he's kind of in a way an indictment of our system. He clearly has a lot of talent, And for whatever reason, whether it's system based, processes based, training based, whatever, we were just never able to unlock that. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but I'm going to keep an eye on Jack. I think he's going to do some good stuff, and maybe he comes back a different player. The Key-ins. So I think the Waratahs have probably the best group of ins, if you want to call them that, or returning players or new players. So you got Ruan Smith, Jed Holloway, Ned Haddigan, Michael Hooper, Tavita Funa, Dylan Peach, Archer Holtz, Hugh Bockenham, Jamie Roberts, and, if reports are to be believed, Kurtley Beale as well. So I've included him there, but that deal, as of time of recording, isn't done. So, yeah, I guess we'll wait and see. Ruan Smith, for those of you who don't know, he's a prop. And if he plays for the Tars, I believe he will be the first and perhaps only Super Rugby player in the professional era to play at least one game for every Super Rugby franchise. He has played for the Force. That's where he started his career. I think he played 2 or 3 games there. He's played about 50 games for the Brumbies. He's played games for the Reds. He's played games for the Rebels. And now, potentially, the Waratahs. So that's pretty cool. Obviously, Michael Hooper there, huge in. So I've always been pretty critical of Michael Hooper, but the way he played during the most recent test window and like, it was incredible. Like, it really was. He's I don't know if he's a different player, but he has way more impact. Like, he's just, yeah, he's good. He's good, man. And I think, as a number 7, maybe he's not the traditional sort of fetcher, creates lots of turnovers, slows the ball down, but like, he's going to give you so much, like, leadership, but he carries the ball a lot, makes a lot of tackles now. Yeah, he is a bit of a pest over the ball, but I think, I don't think we can sleep on the impact that he's probably going to have on this team. The other player there is Tavita Funa. A good get from the Manly Sea Eagles. So athletic, quick, strong. Good under the high ball, good in the air. So, I wouldn't sleep on him either. The other guy I like is Dylan Peach. Like, so he's come out of the Sevens program. He's a big guy, quick. Likely to play on the edge, maybe at outside centre, depending on what they do. But I think he's a guy potentially off the bench who could come in and just soften up a midfield, late in games. So I like him. Jamie Roberts, huge get. I don't know, what. He's obviously towards the end of his career, but, huge amount of experience. And we've seen, Rob Kearney and Richard Kahui do some good things with the Western Force last season at a similar age. And Jamie's probably got just as much, if not more, experience than both of those guys. So, I wouldn't sleep on him, particularly, you got a couple of young fly halves there, stick him at 12 and just let him take some of the pressure off Ben Donaldson or Will Harrison, whoever they deem is going to take the reins in the 10 jumper. So with that said, let's just have a look at a potential lineup. This is how I feel. If everyone's healthy, if everyone's available, they could line up. So up front, Angus Bell, Dave Porecki, and Harry Johnson-Holmes. This is certainly a up-and-coming front row. Not so much Dave Porecki, but Angus Bell and Harry Johnson-Holmes. Like two young front rowers. Angus Bell, I think, is on a trajectory to take a huge leap forward. And Harry Johnson-Holmes, he's got the tough job in the 3 jumper. But I kind of like these guys. And Dave Porecki had some impact last year. So yeah, I think these guys probably have a lot of self-belief that they're they're going to be one of the better front rowers. And one of the better front rows. And I think moving forward, particularly for Angus and Harry Johnson Holmes, they could progress up into Wallabies jumpers and be our Wallabies 1 and 3 for a long time to come. So I'm excited to see that. If we move across to the second row, so I've got Jed Holloway and Ned Hannigan here. Some people keep telling me these two guys are better suited to the back row, but I think they've both got big frames. They're both 110 kgs plus. Jed is a little bit more abrasive the way he carries the ball and the way he defends. Ned's sort of a hybrid. He's a little bit more finesse. He'll look to tip the ball and keep the ball moving. From that carry spot, play in behind to the fly half or the fullback. But I think they're a nice combo playing together. World class, no, but I don't think we have that many world class second rowers in Australia. So, yeah, I think they're solid. Let's just say that they're solid. Back row, I really like this back row. Swinton, Will Harris, and Michael Hooper. So, Lockie Swinton, I think, can develop into a real hard man. I think sometimes he goes a little bit overboard, but I think he's on that trajectory. Michael Hooper, I just spoke about him. We obviously know what he can do. And then, Will Harris, I think he is a prototypical number 8 in terms of his size, his skills, his speed. So I'd really like to see how he develops this year, given an opportunity. The other guy I like in their system is Langy Gleeson. Some of you might not know him. Well, those of you who watch Shoot Shield will know him. Plays for Manly, but he's a young guy. I think he's 20, and I really like his game. He really is one of the stronger ball carriers I've seen. Very abrasive, very aggressive. So, potentially we could see some Langy Gleeson maybe at 6 or at 8 as well. So look out for that. The halves here, so I've gone with Gordon and Donaldson. Gordon, I really like Gordon. I played with Jake at the Sydney Stars, of all places, back in 2015. He was sort of up and coming, and I was on my way out. But I really liked him. I thought he was a good footballer, smart, intelligent, good pass, consistent pass. And he's got a little bit of that see you next Tuesday about him, which I like in a halfback. Ben Donaldson, he came in and contributed last year. I think Will Harrison's probably, I don't know. Will Harrison's solid, but I think Ben Donaldson probably has a higher ceiling. But 10's been a problem for the 10 jumpers have been a problem for the Waratahs really. Since Bernard Foley left. I wouldn't have said Bernard Foley was a world class fly half either. He was just better than the other 4 floating around. So I think Ben Donaldson has a higher ceiling. I think he'll be solid. And I think if we move across to the centre pairing that I've got here, Jamie Roberts and Izzy Parisi, so I think these two guys, if I'm playing fly half for these two guys, I'm just give them the ball, let them go to work. Parisi, we saw some of what he's capable of. Offloads, strong ball carries, getting you go forward. So, I'd be feeding him as much as possible. And Jamie Roberts, so he's kind of that hybrid 12 who can, hits a hard line, can get you some go forward, straightens up your attack really well, but he's also really skilled. So he can, draw in defenders and create space for, the guys at the back and guys outside him. So I think, at 10, I think the Waratahs probably need to make a decision about who it is and stick with it, and then let Parisi and let Roberts go to work and really make, really build some confidence in whoever that is, make that guy look good. And then the back 3, I got Tavita Funa, watched him play in Bowral against the Brumbies, really liked his game, liked what he showed. I've got Alex Newsom on the other wing because I think he should be rewarded for his really solid year last year. Sort of an older statesman. I think he's 27. And And then Curtly Beale at the back. I guess, with the wings, they got plenty of talented wings. Ram, Mark, I can never say his name, and I will learn that. Mark, I apologize, but that, and I guess the other one, I spoke about earlier, Dylan Peach, like he's another guy. So they've got plenty of good young outside backs that they can go to. And then I think if this deal with Curtly Beale doesn't get done, then I think Harrison ends up in the 15 jumper and Donaldson in the 10 jumper, or some iteration of that. Ram can also play fullback. So yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll see how that pans out. But I kind of like this team. And I think the other big in that I haven't mentioned here is Darren Coleman, the new head coach. He's had a lot of success basically everywhere he's been. He was part of the Brumbies setup as an academy coach. So he coached guys like Nick White, Ben Alexander, just to name two, I guess, with 100-plus test caps. Had some success with Eastern Suburbs in Sydney, won a premiership with Gordon, has gone across to the Giltinis in LA and won the MLR in their inaugural season, which I don't think you can sleep on. Like, yeah, I appreciate it's a new competition, but to win for a new team, to win in their first year is really impressive. And then has been given an opportunity back here with the Tars. So I think they'll surprise us. I don't know whether they're good enough yet to vie for that, maybe second spot, but I think third is a realistic goal for them if they can stay healthy, and if these players can give what I think they can give. So if we shift across now, let's have a look at the Melbourne Rebels. I feel like with the Rebels, like every year, I look at them, I like them, and then I think, I think they're gonna play well, and they underperform. So let's have a look anyway. Let's have a look at who they got. So a lot of guys leaving this year. Lucio Sordoni, Ignacio Callas, Steve Cummins, Lewis Holland, Frank Lamani, Tom Pincus, Dane Haylett-Petty, Izzy Nazarani, and Marika Korobete. I guess those last three guys are huge. They're gonna miss them massively. Korobete. Korobeti's like having another back rower out there who can finish. And Izzy Nazarani, say what you want about his fitness and all that, but really talented footballer. And at times was the form number 8 in Australia. So he's a big loss. Key ins: Tamati Iwani, Joe Pincus from out of the Sevens program, Moses Sorovi, Ifai Mafu, and Matt Phillip. So I think two guys here that stick out to me. Obviously, Matt Phillip, really solid second rower. Made a really valuable contribution to the Wallabies recently on their most recent tour. And then Moses Sorovi, I've really liked his game. He's a halfback. He's just never really got an opportunity up at the Reds to sort of make that jumper his own. And I believe he had a few games sort of playing out on the wing as well. So that's not ideal for a halfback. So we have a look at a potential lineup. Cameron Orr, who was really solid last year, sort of developed into their sort of first choice tight head. Jordan Ulese, who again is another guy with a lot of potential. He just needs to learn how to throw straight, as most hookers do in Australia. And Pone Fa'almasili. Sorry, mate. Fa'almasili. Goodness me. I really like his game because he's a really solid scrummager, but he offers you a lot around the park. Some of his ball carries, very impressive. And his work rate, when he's healthy, really, really good. So, this is a decent front row. I'd probably put the Tars above them up front, but it's decent. Then they're certainly going to hold their own. They're not going to be found out. Second row, Matt Phillip and Trevor Hosey. I like both of these guys. As I said, Matt Phillip's really solid. He gives you he gives you he plays hard, tackles hard, carries hard, hits rucks. He does a lot of that dirty work that I think goes under the radar. Trevor Hosey is a bit the same, but he's got a little bit more skill. Plays like another back rower. So I think these two guys together are going to be really solid. And provide that sort of grunt and go forward that you need from time to time from your type forwards. This back row is not bad. Rob Leota was really, really good for the Wallabies. I think in the end, Leota and Valentini, were an unreal 1-2 punch. So I think, he's going to have a big year this year. Richard Hardwick. So I like his game. I like his frame. He kind of reminds me of a rugby league prop in the way that he runs. A little bit more skilled, I guess, but in the way that he carries, sort of upright, high knees, and he can work his upper body through contact. I've watched him play for a while, and I've always sort of hoped his game would progress, and I think now he'll get that opportunity with Nazarani gone. And then Michael Wells, so he's been named their captain. He's another guy who's a bit of a journeyman. He's played for the Tars, he's played for the Brumbies, and sort of found his home with the Rebels. Again, really solid guy. He plays a bit loose. Likes to get his carries out on the edges. And he's effective. He's effective out there. So I can't blame him. It's not bad, but I think this is probably second to bottom in terms of back rows across the competition. In the halves, Joe Powell, I think for a period there, everyone thought he was going to be the incumbent Wallabies halfback. That sort of hasn't panned out that way. I played with Joe. I like his game. Quick pass, long pass, but perhaps not as consistent as some of the other halfbacks. And he, whether this is a system thing by design or whatever, he doesn't seem to run and snipe as much as he did. Certainly when I played with him, he was really effective there. Carter Gordon, back end of last year, was really solid in that 10 jumper, and it sounds like they're going to back him again. So looking forward to see his development. And he's got one of the greats outside him in Matt Tu'umua to really mentor him and take some of that playmaking pressure off him when he can. So I like this centre pairing. Matt I think has always been really unlucky with the Wallabies. I thought that when him and Christian Leali'ifano were playing 10 and 12 for the Brumbies 2013, 2014, I thought, they were the top two, together. I thought they were brilliant, at 10 and 12. And I sort of, after a season, I thought, man, that's awesome. Like we've got this 10 and 12 combo, that's going to be elite for the next 10 years. Then Christian gets injured. Matt, I think, was given more responsibility and potentially wasn't as effective. And, now we've had this kind of revolving door of 10s and 12s in the Wallaby side. But he's very, very experienced, super calm, cool, collected guy, and a good guy, good locker room guy. So I think, he'll spend a lot of time with Gordon, and, hopefully those two grow together. Stacey Lee, he's another sort of abrasive centre, an international with Samoa. So I'm excited to see how this trio play off each other, because I think they could do some exciting things if their forwards pack can get them a bit of go forward. And then the back three, Andrew Kellaway, he was brilliant for the Wallabies last year. another kind of journeyman career. Like if you go back and look at his under-20s career, like he was incredible. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised it took this long. But he sort of talked a little bit about that, where he said that he didn't really listen to coaching and just kind of did his own thing. So he's kind of figured it out, and shown the world what he can do. Reece Hodge, Mr. Fix-It, solid. I love Reece Hodge. Like, I've got him at fullback, but you expect him to feature on the wing, expect him to feature in the centres. He might even play fly half. Like, he's just that kind of dude. And then Lockie Anderson. I like Lockie Anderson. Another guy who's come out of the Sevens program. And then this year might be his opportunity to show what he can do in the 15-a-side game. So, I kind of look at this team, and I think, they're vying for maybe the 4th or 5th spot, probably the 4th spot in the Australian standings. I don't think we have a conference system anymore. I think it's just the top teams go through. But yeah, maybe, I guess we'll see. That maybe this is the year they overperform, because every other year they seem to underperform. So, new coach, new setup, all of that might help. But I think, they're probably sitting in 4th or 5th spot. Sorry, Melbourne. Western Force is the next team up. I like the Western Force. I like their coach, Tim Sampson. Played for him, worked with him at the mighty Tokoroong Vikings. I think, any team that he coaches plays expansive footy, and it's fun. He encourages everyone from 1 to 15 to play footy, have good skills. I remember one of my prop and buddies, Phil Kitte, I hope you're listening, my dude in France. He came in and, Sambo allowed him to kick the footy, put in grubbers and that kind of thing because he was having fun. So, probably an extreme example. I don't think you're going to see too many front rowers putting grubber kicks and chip kicks through, but he really cultivates, skill development and some of that creativity. So, he probably hasn't had the cattle the last couple of years and hasn't had that sort of 3 or 4 year cycle where you get to know guys, get to work with guys, get to develop guys. So I think this year might be their year, but if we have a look at their key ins and outs, like they're another team that's just had a huge number of outs. So Marcel Brash, who's a US Eagles international, Thomas Kubeli, Argentinian international, Rob Kearney, Irish international, Tavita Kurandrani, Wallabies international, Jono Lance, Thomas Lozana, Kieran Longbottom, Domingo Miotti, who I thought was really, really good for them last year, Jordan Olowefela, Jonah Placid, and Henry Tofu. So, you look at that, Thomas Kubeli at 9, that's a big loss. Kearney at the back is a big loss. Kurandrani's a big loss from that 13 jumper, Miotti as well. And then Jono Lance, I feel like he was kind of a talisman for them. But so they lost a few big names, but we'll have a look at what I think they're going to do, throughout the year for their best 15. Some key ins: Daniel Alla, Isaac Fines, Lele Wassa, Bailey Kuenzel, Harry Lloyd, Manasa Matelli, Rajan Pesitoa, and Reese Tarpany. So there's a bunch of Brumbies. So Bailey, Harry, Pesitoa, and Tarpany, and Fines, Lelewasa are all ex-Brumbies guys. Which look, it's not a huge surprise because these are all guys that Sambo would have seen when he was in Canberra. Harry Lloyd's a really solid loose head prop, and then the rest of these guys, young backs. Isaac Fines he's legit, man. I'll talk about him in a minute, but he's legit. And then some young backs, who are just looking for an opportunity. They didn't get it with the Brumbies, and the Force potentially presents them with that opportunity. So if we have a look at who they've got up front: Tom Robertson, Feliti Kaituu, and Santiago Medrano. So it's funny. I keep saying I like the front rows, but I really, really like this front row. You know, Tom Robinson, international, really, really solid, loose head prop. You know, does the dirty work, scrummage as well. Another guy I played with at the Sydney Stars. Feliti Kaituu, so he's just been named their captain. And I think he's on a trajectory to potentially take that Wallabies number 2 jumper. Because to me, that's wide open. If someone can straight line outs, job's theirs. And then Santiago Medrano, he's the Argentinian tight end. He's the most famous person in Argentina, not named Lionel Messi. I'm dead serious. Like, Argentinians love scrums. They love their tight head props. And he is one of the best in the business. So I think he's going to cause some damage. He's going to cause some headaches for some of these loose head props. We look in the second row, Isaac Rodda and Sitaleki Tamani, both really good international footballers. Sitaleki Tamani came back and made a huge impact. You've also got Jeremy Thrush there, another guy with a ton of experience. So don't be surprised if he features throughout the year. You know, there's a bit of a rotation going on there. This is a decent back row. Tim Anstey, who sort of separated himself last year, started playing some really good footy. Another guy who's come out of the Sevens program. Bernard Stunder, another really solid, abrasive ball carrier. And Kane Koteka, who's a local Perth guy, who's a bit more of a traditional 7 fetcher, you know, pretty kind of understated and quiet guy. Kind of lets Tim and Bernard do their thing while he'll go about his job, probably unnoticed. But I think this is a good back row. You know, there's speed, athleticism, strength, and an ability to slow the ball down. So I think they're going to fly under the radar. I think they're going to be good. The halves, Isaac Fines-Lelewasa and Jake McIntyre. Isaac Fines-Lelewasa, he's a legit footballer. So I'm pretty sure he won the Player of the Year up in Queensland. You know, didn't get a crack with the Reds. Came down to Canberra. I don't know if he won the McDougall medal, but he was damn close. And you know, like incredible footballer. You know, good pass, but some of the stuff he can do with the ball in hand, you don't often see from a halfback. So Ian Pryor's been their guy, but I think Isaac Fines-Lelewasa, I think he's the guy. You know, the Brumbies asked him to play a bit on the wing, and he was good. You know, scored a couple of good tries. You know, he won a couple of games late for the Brumbies coming on off the bench. You know, with his sniping ability. So, you know, if he can find that balance between I'm going to attack as a ball carrier and I'm gonna zing it from the base here, I think, you know, we could be talking about him as part of the Wallaby squad. I truly believe that. Shouts to Isaac Fines-Lelewasa. He's an up and coming guy. Jake McIntyre, solid. You know, like we don't seem to be producing these world class 10s, but we got lots of solid 10s. You know, he'll do his job. Good kicking game, reads the game pretty well. But again, I think, you know, if we have a look at this centre pairing here, you know, he's going to defer to Kyle Godwin and Richard Kahui a little bit. You know, and again, like Kyle Godwin, you know, was an elite, you know, 12, you know, 5 years ago. You know, we were talking about him as part of the Wallaby squad. So, you know, and he's not really a secondary playmaker. He can play that role, but he's kind of, you know, he straightens up your attack. He'll shift the ball when it needs to be shifted. Reads the game pretty well and solid defensively. And then Richard Kahui, you know, like All Black, you know, won a championship, premiership, Super Rugby title, whatever you want to call it, with the Chiefs. And you know, you saw the impact that he had on that team. You know, he's got a bit of that flair. Like he'll throw offloads, he'll put some kicks through, he'll be a bit speculative. So, you know, he's a guy who'll have fun. And I think his impact will be big again this year. And then if we look at the back three, Tony Pulu, Jack McGregor, and Byron Ralston, I think that's a good back three. Jack McGregor's a bit of a character. He had a couple of really good games last year from the back. Byron Ralston sort of captured our attention in 2020, cooled off a little bit in 2021, but that doesn't take away from his ability. He's still incredibly quick. He takes a lot of intercepts. So you got to be confident in your defensive line, and you've got to have the backing of your coach and the rest of your team to be able to shoot out like that and take those intercepts. So I like that. And then Tony Pulu, he's another experienced guy. He's bounced around a little bit, found a home here, hopefully with the Force, and really good finisher, strong ball carrier. So he'll come in and look for work if he needs to. So I think as much as I want the Force to be up in that third spot, I think, what? They're going to finish third in the Australian group. They're better than the Tars. They're better than the Rebels. So shouts the Force. Yep. And I think they're going to play an attractive style of footy, which I always like to reward. I really enjoyed watching them, as they found their straps. They weren't scared to fling that ball wide. They had a lot of solid carries up the middle, but really open and expansive footy. They don't sort of play that 10-man footy off the 9. They really like to use those 15-metre channels. So I don't think they're on the Brumbies and Reds level yet, but I think they're on a trajectory to get there, especially when you look at the number of, I think they got 7 junior wallabies coming out of their academy. So I think they're trending up. Brumbies is next. Everyone knows Brumbies is my team. Have followed them, from the very start. 5 years old at Manuka Oval against. They played against Transvaal, and there was a period in my life where I'd never missed a game. I never missed a game at the game. That's changed a bit now that I'm old, but yeah. So if we have a look at their key ins and outs, and look, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be super biased. I love the Brumbies, so sorry if I think they're the best team in Super Rugby. Suck it. It's my podcast. What are you going to do? Yeah, that's right. So key outs. So we mentioned Bailey, Isaac, Rajan Reese and Harry have all gone up to or across to the Force. James Tucker, Mac Hansen, Archer Holtz, and Solomon Cutter. So Solomon Cutter, I think, came with a lot of fanfare, but was a bit disappointing. Now, the guy I want to talk about, Mac Hansen. So I coached Mac, and I'd convinced myself that I was biased, right? Because I always liked him. I always thought there was something about him that was unique. Always thought there was something that just worked. I can't tell you what it is or what it was, but there was something different about him, and as a 14, 15-year-old, like he could kick the ball from 22 to 22. So he played fly half for my teams, but he was a patient fly half. Shift, take off. And he'd take off and no one would touch him. So it's always hard to gauge, junior footy, but this is a guy who played for Australian schoolboys. He was part of a team, an ACT schoolboys team, I believe, that won the national championship, which doesn't happen a lot in the ACT, and also was one of the best players for the Australian under-20s, and he just if you 12 months ago, if you asked anyone, he was probably the 10th best winger in Australia, maybe even lower. So I got an interesting stat here. So Mac played 795 minutes across 3 seasons with the Brumbies, and goes to Connaught with, another Australian export, Andy Friend. Plays 710 minutes for Connaught. Gets an Irish call-up, wins man of the match. And look, this isn't the first time that Australian rugby and actually the Brumbies, in recent history has let a potentially world-class talent, walk out the door. People forget Tyrell Lomax was born in Canberra. Yes. Son of John Lomax, who played for the Canberra Raiders. He's now one of the better tight heads in New Zealand. He played half a dozen test matches and is really pushing for that number 3 jersey with the All Blacks. So, I guess two out of a big system is, you might not think is a big deal, but those 2 guys potentially world class. Like, look, Max suits the style of play that Ireland want to play. Their wingers play loose. They allow them to roam. They allow them to come into first receiver, look for work. Our system it tends to be, unless you're Marika Koroibete, that you stand out on the edge and you kind of just wait for the ball to get to you. That's fine. The funny thing is, I still think his best position is fly half or fullback. I don't think wing is natural to him, but as I said, rolls up, first test match, unreal try assist to Bundyaki, and there you go. He's Irish Mac now. Maybe hopefully I can get him on this podcast. We can talk about it, but yeah, it's rough. Anyway, it's my Mac rant done. Key ins: Sefo Kautai, Fred Kahia, Ed Kennedy, Rod Iona, Hudson Crichton, Chris Fowle-Sortia, Ollie Sapsford, Cam Clark, and Jesse Mogg. So there's a couple of guys I like here. Chris Fowle-Sortia, lots of potential, never quite got it right the last time around. Jesse Mogg, another guy who honestly, I remember talking to some guys from New Zealand, administrators, coaches, and they were like, Jesse Mogg is legit. He is legit. They were all scared of him. And particularly, his kicking game was good, but the way he would hit the ball outside the winger or outside the outside centre and just take off into space. And they were always worried about him on kick returns. I remember one day I was playing here locally. He played for Wests and kicked the ball. Our dumb fly half kicked the ball straight down the middle of the field, and Jesse grabbed it and ran straight back down the middle of the field, untouched, and scored under the post. I haven't seen, I played a lot of first grade footy around the world and Premier footy, and I've not seen, I think I've only seen that once, maybe twice. Actually, Mac Hansen did it. I wasn't playing, but he did it as well. So someone who can do that kind of stuff, yeah. And I think the other in that we need to probably talk about is Stephen Larkham. That was a disaster last time around. Yeah, maybe he's gone to Ireland and figured it out, but I don't know. I guess time will tell. So we look at this front row: James Slipper, Connell McInerney, and Alan Alatoa. James Slipper has come on. He's become really, really solid in that number 1 jumper. Not just for the Brumbies, but for the Wallabies as well. And the hard thing here is he eats up a lot of Scott Seo's minutes. But Scotty, I thought last year just I don't know if he had. Yeah, and look, I love Scotty. Scotty's my dude. I played with Scotty. I played with is probably not the right word. He took my spot a couple of times in between his Wallabies tests, but he's had a lot of wear and tear on his body now. He came. He only started playing in the front row as sort of a 16 or probably not even 17-year-old. Before that, he was a back rower, and so cracked it early. has played a lot of test footy. He's had knee injuries, back injuries, hip injuries, groin injuries. So, last year it looked like some of that wear and tear had caught up with him. I hope that's not the case, but, it's hard. So James Slipper gets the nod here. Conor McInerney in the 2-jumper, another guy I played with, local Canberra guy, which is always good. But, there's 2 guys waiting in the wings there in Lachlan Lonergan and Billy Pollard, who both just as easily could take that spot. And then we also forget about Folau Fainga, who's been really solid. It's just there's a whole crop of young hookers in Canberra that are nipping at his heels. So it'd be really interesting to see how that shakes out. And I guess the big thing too is that 2-jumper is wide open for the Wallabies. So whoever can throw the straightest line-out ball gets it, in my view. And then Alan Alatoa, statesman of the game. He's the skip. He'll play a lot of minutes. And he's just solid, super solid tight head. My view at the moment is the best scrummaging tight head in Australia. There's another tight head who maybe can take that the mantle. We can talk about in a minute. He's certainly not the most athletic or skilled. I think we all know who I'm talking about, who that is, but I think he's the best scrummaging option. And at least in the short term, gives our set piece, Brumbies and Wallabies set piece, the best chance at doing its job. If we shift across to the second row, Darcy Swain and Cadern Neville. So Darcy came on in leaps and bounds last year. I feel like a broken record. There's another guy I played with. Shouts to Tuggeranong Vikings. But yeah, just really, really good. I love his game. He's solid. He's aggressive. He's big, fast, huge feet, size 18 feet or something silly. And just I think this is the year where he really cements himself as a world-class second rower. And I truly believe that. He's already elite come line-out time, but I think the rest of it is going to come this year, tackling, ball carrying, being that big, abrasive, aggressive bully in the second row. Giteau Neville, I think he's good. I think, he's just solid. He's going to do his job, make tackles, get up in the line out, hit rucks, and if he gets an opportunity, he'll carry that ball forward. He'll take it forward for you. So I like this pairing. There's a couple of guys in the system that maybe get an opportunity. Tom Hooper, he's another dude, young guy. He actually played in a Wallabies trial either last year or the year before when they had that possibles probables thing. I think he's only 21, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him feature here. He's been incredible playing locally again for the Tuggeranong Vikings. God, you guys are getting so many shouts today. But I think he's the potential long term. But I think Neville is going to do a really good job, as that custodian, and he's not going to give that jersey up, but I think he'll have to at some point. And then, this I like this back row. I really like this back row. So Pete Samu, Rob Valentini, and Jerome Brown. So Pete Samu for the Wallabies has really cemented himself in that sort of 19 or 20 jumper. Just comes on, energy, makes some breaks up the middle, So I'd really like to see him be able to do that for a full game. He's another guy who plays really loose, but I think that's the system that the Brumbies run, where they have the 6 and the 7 or the 8, depending on who's playing out in the 15-metre channels. And so Pete Samu scores an incredible amount of tries. But perhaps if he could pick up his work rate in the middle of the field a little bit more, that might help put him above someone like Rob Leota or Lockie Swinton in that Wallabies 6 jersey. Rob Valentini was incredible last season, and for the Wallabies, another guy's come along in leaps and bounds, just so good. I really like his game. He's aggressive, carries hard, tackles hard. He's a pest at the breakdown. Like, he's one of those guys. He's a don't want to call him world class yet. He's shown glimpses, but I think he's another guy who can take a jump this year and really put a stamp on that 8 jersey and separate himself even further from someone like Harry Wilson. Jerome Brown, we haven't seen a lot of Jerome Brown in the 7 jersey. So he's got a comparable game to Pete Samu. Likes to play a bit loose. He's a bit more of a fetcher. He'll put his head into some rucks and try and create some turnovers. But I don't think he needs to be that guy. Like, I think the 3 of them can all do it. So I don't think they need an out-and-out number 7. I think between the 3 of them, they'll figure out who's going to take the bulk of the carries, who's going to be the pest at the breakdown, and who's going to pick up the work rate defensively. So, I like this back row. This back row we could see, 2 of these 3 guys we could see as part of a Wallabies back row. And you never know, Jerome Brown might make that jump too. Halves, Nick White, Noah Lolesio, pretty easy there. Noah has been on an upward trajectory, and I think having Quade Cooper back in the fold to kind of mentor him a bit is going to help. Nick White's been solid for a long time. I like Ryan Lonergan, brother of Lachlan. I think Ryan has a more consistent pass and is a better kicker, better goal kicker, better general play kicker. But I think they're going to stick with Nick for that experience for the minute. And then, we know what Noah can do. Noah's shown flashes of being elite. And so this is another opportunity, another year under his belt to hopefully, get to a point where he can really push Quade Cooper for that 10 jumper come the World Cup next year. Ire Simoni, Lenny Giteau. Ire Simoni's really solid, like straightens the attack, shifts the ball when he needs to shift it. Really good defensively. I think he's probably been a bit unlucky not to feature more for the Wallabies. But I like, these 2 guys really complement each other. Lenny Giteau, you guys are going to stop listening, but played with Len, and he's now starting to show you guys some of the stuff that he was doing at the club level. So some of his offloading is just ridiculous. Like as a back rower or a winger or fullback who's playing outside him, like you just need to be ready. Like it'll pop up. At some point it'll pop up. You just need to have your hands up and hope it sticks, because he's incredible at freeing up an arm, freeing up an upper body, and just flicking that ball out. And as I said, he started to show that at the Wallabies level. So, I think if he can continue on this uptick, he's a 13 for a long time for the Wallabies. And then back row, Tom Wright, Tom Banks, Jesse Mogg. Andy Muirhead is a little bit unlucky here, but I think given Jesse's kicking game and his experience now overseas, and then Tom Wright as well, with what he showed us with his opportunities with the Wallabies, I think it's going to be really hard. And unless you're going to move Tom Banks, you move Jesse to fullback and give Andy one of the wing spots. I think it's just going to be hard because Tom Banks still has to be in the conversation for that Wallabies fullback spot. So I like this back 3 for a couple of reasons. Tom Wright gives you the flair. Tom Banks gives you stability, speed at the back, and then Jesse Mogg, in a way is kind of a wild card. He's so fast, and I assume he's maintained that. But then he can create pressure through his kicking game. So on kick returns, like he can put the ball in behind the opposition, 10, 15 meters behind them, just because of how far he kicks the ball. which we know throughout a game creates pressure. So, are they the best team? Yep. No. I think it's really close between them and the Reds, and we'll talk about the Reds in a sec. And I think it could go either way. I think if Nick Berry, if you're listening, Nick Berry, I think if we can avoid a game where Nick Berry referees the Brumbies and the Reds, then I think maybe the result goes the other way. But you got to consider too, and we'll do this in a sec. You got to consider too, like if we now pull up the Reds, like they have got such a young team as well. Now with some experience, it's gonna that you'd anticipate are going to take another jump. And the other thing, so if we pull up the transfers here, they're returning a huge portion of their squad. So they're only turning over 3 players in BPA, Brandon Pangaromosa, Bryce Hegarty, and Moses Sorovi. And, BPA and Hegarty were solid contributors. BPA, I think they'll miss him, but the other 2, Bryce and Hegarty and Sorovi, like, I feel like they've got the cattle to replace them. And then, you look at the guys coming in, Spencer Jeans, Tom Liner, Lepeti Faifua, and George Blake. The name that really stands out to me there is Tom Liner. You've probably seen what his dad was doing for Queensland many years ago. You've probably seen what his brother Lewis is doing in England. So if Tom's got, 75, 80, 90% of what his dad and his brother have, like, he could be that next 10. Like he could knock someone like Noah Lolesio off that perch. So yeah, I mean, look, let's have a look at their side, and I'll tell you. So Feo Fotuaika, Alex Murphy, and Taniela Tupou. So look, Murphy for me, I feel like hooker's the really weak spot here because Murphy can't hit the backside of a barn with his throw. And, you've heard this is a common theme with hookers in Australia. Maybe it's because they're all converted back rowers, but they're not. They, particularly in pressure situations, they don't seem to be able to hit their target. But look, Alex Murphy's solid. He's played a lot of super footy already. So I think he starts the year there. Then maybe there's someone who'll come and push him for playing time, but I think he's the guy. Fotuaika really played himself into the 1 jersey last year. I think he's another guy who's really solid. He's an athlete too. It's just unfortunate he's playing next to Taniela Tupou because he's a good ball carrier. He's good in defence. He's a solid scrummager. And then we look at Taniela Tupou, who's probably the most talented tight head prop ever in terms of just the natural physical gifts that he has. And if his scrummaging develops to a point where he's even just solid at the international level, like, we're going to be talking about him as one of the greatest ever. And look, I've written about this before. Taniela, he defaults to one style of scrummaging, which is, it's a little bit illegal, but he's getting away with it, so power to him. But at the international level, and we've seen this against France, we've seen this against the All Blacks, we've seen this against South Africa, and we've seen it against England now. Because he defaults to that, some of these better props have worked it out and can now negate his effectiveness at scrum time. So, and look, I want to point out, this isn't Taniela's fault. We need to develop this for him. As the Australian coaching setup, the system needs to now go, okay, Taniela, you're an incredible athlete, so skilled, fast, strong, big work rate, fit, whatever. We need to get your scrummaging right. if he gets his scrummaging right, we've got the best tight end in the world. Backing those guys up, Lukan Salakai-Loto and Angus Blythe. 2, again, really solid. You know, Lukan, to me, is a little bit frustrating because I think he is much better than he thinks he is. Or maybe not as good as he thinks he is, which is why, you know, sometimes he goes missing in games. I really like his frame. I really like his skill set. I like when he gets angry because he starts throwing that big body around. Angus Blythe's really solid, you know, set piece specialist in terms of the line out. Really solid there. And I guess another guy who does a lot of work that doesn't necessarily get rewarded. So I'm excited to see these two again this year. Now this back row, bruh. Like, so you're looking at this, and then they've got Scott Young as well. So Fraser McWright, Harry Wilson, and Liam Wright. Like, man, I look at these guys and I feel like, you know, these guys are just going to be so good for so long at the Reds. Like, they're not even close to their potential. Like, no, they haven't even scratched the surface, and they yet haven't had a lot of opportunity to play together. You know, through injuries and all of that. So if these three guys, even just for like the next 2 or 3 years, can stay healthy, with Scott Robinson as well, like the rest of Super Rugby is on blast in Australia at least. Like, you know, these guys are elite, and they're only going to get better. And they're only going to learn more about each other, more about their opposition. And, yeah. So, you know, these guys frighten me as a Brumbies fan, but excite me as a Wallabies fan. Let's put it that way. Halves, Tate McDermott, James O'Connor. You know, James O'Connor, like, redemption story of the century. You know, he's figured it out finally. You know, one Super Rugby player of the year, Australian Super Rugby player of the year, like, you know, was probably unlucky. Was unlucky he got injured, which sort of opened the door for Quade Cooper, you know, maybe thankfully. But yeah, you know, he's the best fly half in Australia for me. And then Tate McDermott, I just like him. Great pass, seems like a good leader, vocal at the back, decent kick. He's got a running game, and he makes good decisions with his running game too. So, you know, to me, this is the best halves pairing in the competition. And, you know, they're potentially going to play a lot of football together for the Wallabies as well, pending Giteau Law. So, yeah. And then centers, Hamish Stewart, Hunter Paisami. So, I think Hunter Paisami features in there somewhere. 13, 12, doesn't really matter. And I think they just need to figure out what they do around him. Hamish Stewart did a really good job for periods last year. Got another guy, Isaac Henry, who did a really good job. You know, maybe Tom Liner comes in and turns himself into a 12. Like, I don't know. You know, maybe Jordan Pataya jumps back into being an outside centre and Paisami goes back to 12. So, I don't know. But what I'm saying is they've got options. And I guess it's really just about what Dave Rennie wants Paisami doing. Because, yeah, there were patches with the Wallabies where he was incredible. Patches where he wasn't so good, but that's all part of the learning curve. And you know, yeah, the Reds to me have the most flexibility in the centres, and probably the highest ceiling too. You know, Hamish Stewart's solid. Is he going to play for Australia? I doubt it. Is he going to be world class? I don't think so. But he's good enough to play in between Paisami and O'Connor and free up opportunities for those two to do their thing, as well as the next three guys we're about to talk about in Filippo Dongunu, Jordan Petaia, and Suliasi Vunivalu. So there's a report that came out today that Petaia's the guy they're looking at fullback. And I think we've been robbed a little bit with Petaia just because he hasn't been able to play, hasn't been able to stay healthy, and there's probably 1,000 reasons for that. You could tell me he came in too early. You could tell me, he's got a funny gait, whatever. I don't really care. We've just been robbed, and we haven't had the opportunity to watch him, and he hasn't had the opportunity to find his home. He's played in the centres, he's played on the wing. Now they're going to ask him to play fullback. So I hope this works because I think this back three could be incredible, and especially given what I just said about the centres and the halves, this back line's going to cause some real issues. But yeah, I think we just got to give Jordan Petaia some time. Filippo Dongunu, he's been really good a couple of years. He's done his job for the Wallabies. He's done his job for the Reds. And Suliasi Vunivalu, we haven't seen really yet what he's capable of in our game. I don't think he's completely unlocked, rugby union yet. And I think for most guys, it probably takes a year or two. You look at probably everyone who's done that conversion, it was maybe 2 seasons, maybe 3 before they'd really figured out the game, unless they'd played before in the case of someone like Matt Rogers. But, even Lottie Takiri, Wendell Saylor, to Manatahu, it took them a little while to just figure out the game. So I think we get to see that this year. But again, it really depends, so if Jordan Petaia slides back to the wing, does Jock Campbell come back in or whoever at fullback, or does Hamish Stewart drop back there? And yeah, anyway, I think the Reds have got the most potential, and they've also got the most flexibility, which is pretty scary as a Brumbies fan. So again, I think the Reds end up the top Australian-based team, but I think it is very close between the Reds and the Brumbies. So I guess if we're going to recap, I'm going to say Reds, Brumbies, Force, Waratahs, Rebels. Suck it, Rebels. All right. And now before I go, because I always get asked to do this and I always cop a lot of shit on Reddit, so I don't know why I do this to myself. But here is the Give 'em Liam podcast, cover.com.au, pre-season Wallabies side. From 1 to 15, Angus Bell, Falidi Kaitu'u, because I just think that jersey is wide open and it could be anyone, but he's my guy right now. Alan Ala'atoa, Darcy Swain, Matt Phillip, Rob Leota, Rob Valentini, Michael Hooper, because I just feel like they are the perfect complement to each other. But I guess we'll see what happens and how that Reds back row progresses. Tate McDermott and Quade Cooper. I think, Lalesio and O'Connor are unlucky here. And maybe you figure out a way to play Cooper and O'Connor together. Maybe O'Connor plays some fullback. I don't know. But just given what Quade did, I just don't think we can count him out. I just think he's our guy, And then in the centres, Karevi and Ikitau. Hunter Paisami's really unlucky here. And I think, again, it just depends on what happens with this Giteau Law stuff. So, if Karevi's out, then I think Paisami is the 12 with Len outside him. And I think, Karevi's a bigger guy, but Paisami's a similar kind of player in what he gives. And then, Jordan Petaia, Kurtley Beale, Andrew Kellaway. So, maybe that's a bit of a cop-out with Petaia on one wing. But, I think you have to have Kellaway there, given what he did, and if that continues. And then I think if Kurtley Beale plays, if he comes back, I think he's still the guy in the 15 jersey. But, depending on how Patai goes, maybe he ends up there, Kurt's on the bench, and we got Dungunu or Vunivalu or Mog or whoever as another winger. So, I look at this team and I like this team. Is this team this year going to beat the All Blacks 3 times or 2 times? I don't think so. But given the players that we have waiting in the wings, I think next year we're a chance. Yeah, you heard it here first. I think next year, 2023, leading into a World Cup, I think we'll be peaking. If everyone stays healthy and if everyone continues on this uptick. All right. Man, I've been talking for an hour and a half. Hopefully you guys are still listening. If not, I don't care. Yes, I do. I do care. So what I want you to do is subscribe to this podcast, subscribe to the Covers YouTube channel, go follow the Cover. If I ever get around to setting up a Give 'em Liam podcast, Instagram, Facebook, whatever page, I want you to follow that. And I want you to get pumped. We're only a few days away from Super Rugby starting up again. I know it's going to be a weird season. Again, we're going to play each other first and then the Kiwi sides, but just get pumped. Like, it's back. It's different. Yes, we don't have the South Africans, but it's back. And we need to get behind it, because if we don't get behind it, I think it disappears. I think players head overseas where there are crowds and there are money. The sponsors walk away. The broadcasters walk away. And we're left with semi-professional rugby here in Australia. So let's get behind it. Buy a ticket. Wear your face mask. Wash your hands. Buy a Stan Sport subscription. Watch it on Channel 9 if you don't want to buy a Stan Sport subscription. And let's get it. All right. Thank you to the Cover. Thank you to producer. And I really, really hope you tune in for more, because this is going to be a really, really, really fun podcast. I'm telling you. I promise you. Thank you for listening to the bonus episode. I will see you next week.